Kenneth Davis, Big Ten Country, joins us as he does every Friday here on 365 Sports. And Kenneth, I want to start out. We'll talk about this week next, but last week you and I wrote off Michigan. We're like, they can't score. And look, this idea of you're going to get big plays in the running game every week is not sustainable. But it worked against USC, and that defense showed that, they still got some dudes. By the way, Garrett, I never did say this, but I think this is the best segment. Kalel Mullings is their running back. And so for 48 hours, it bothered me that I have never heard of anybody named Kalel except Superman, right? So I looked it up, and I was like, okay, did the Superman creators steal this from some other, thing? Was it, all this? So no, you look up Kalel, and most people who name their kids Kalel are Superman fans. So right. I sent a text to Angelique Shingelis, who covers Michigan. She's one of the best. And I said, hey, can you just maybe if you get a chance, ask him? And she's like, well, that's kind of interesting. Let me ask him right now. So she sent him a text. He responded, yes, his mother was a crazy big Superman fan and just took out the hyphen in Kalel. So Kalel Mullings. And the other thing that bothered me was they kept calling him Kalel, and I was like, I think that's Kalel. I think that's Kalel, and that means he's Superman. And sure enough, I was right, and I don't even know the kid. And so my nerdiness, and look, I'll show you this. This is my mouse pad. Okay. My nerdiness paid off for once, and I know of anybody that we're going to talk to on this show, Kenneth, you would appreciate nerdiness paying off.
Okay, so let me, full disclosure, my nephew from one of the favorite people, my younger brother passed from leukemia some years ago. His middle child's name is Kalel. And my brother got that because when I was younger, I was going to name my first son Kalel. My first son's name is Kenton. Yeah, so your nerdiness, it speaks to my heart is what I'm trying to say to you, that you peeped that. Anybody that's been a superhero fan or a comic book nerd at some point in your lives, you got to love that one. So, yeah, I love the fact that you did your research to find out. But you're right. It would be interesting. Because when you're saying that, I was wondering did it have like a Gaelic origin? You know what I'm saying? When you think about,
well, it's Hebrew actually.
Okay. That would definitely make sense. That would definitely make sense.
Because Smith and Schuster Simon and Schuster were Jewish. They're Jewish guys. So it means voice of God in Hebrew, or loosely translated. So
I didn't know that.
I was looking. I was like, okay, well. I was like, well, I mean, maybe he's Jewish. I had no idea. I don't know. I don't know.
We're Jewish too. We're out there. We're out there.
All Christian people are 50% Jewish.
Right.
It's the first half, right? So I was like, well, maybe I don't know. I mean, so I just wrote that, and I was like, oh, man, there we go. I feel like I got a scoop. I mean, minor scoop at that, but still, I can't wait for her to write a column on it.
That's where I was going. I was like, you just wrote someone's story.
She was like, no, I'm going to write about this eventually, because, again, here's the other cool thing about Kalel Mullings is that nobody was talking about him. He's not the one on the video game, but he's the one who's producing for them right now.
Yeah, former linebacker is just mauling and grading everybody. And as you pointed out, led them to victory last week. Listen, I want to apologize to the University of Michigan's fan base. I was so high off of that Kool-Aid from USC that we did not respect your championship vigor. I didn't see it. I know Michigan has an insane record of having victories when the quarterback throws under 100 yards. Alex Orji didn't do it through the air, but they pulled it off. Shout out to Sharon Moore and that staff. And you look at what Wink did to that USC deep. The fact that Miller Moss was running for his life about the first 3 quarters of that game, it kind of shows you that, USC still has some way to do. I'm still happy for what USC has brought to the Big Ten and how well they've played, but there's still the questions about those trenches. And I guess a team, if we were going to talk about trenches that could do it, is a team with Michigan that's built up front when you're talking about the defensive line and the offensive line. So it'll be interesting moving forward against some teams that can kind of get into a type of situation where Michigan will have to play from behind what they're going to do in the quarterback position as they go further into their Big Ten season. But for them to do that to SC last week, you got to give them their props. And I will eat crow on that respectfully. It's funny, but that's one of those things. Sometimes when you do this, everybody wants to be right. Nobody wants to be wrong. But none of us are 100% right. Now, people know that in life in general. But I was watching that victory like, oh, boy, next week, when we talk about this, what I don't want to hear.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, man, this one right here. But, we had some other games that worked out in our way. So I'm not – we had some – but this – it was – to me, this was good because, one, you don't want the slippage with Michigan to be as vast as what it looks like it could be. That we still have some games to move forward, but it's good to see against an offense that can put up points and had such a balanced attack when you're talking about through the air in USC, that they showed that this is still Big Ten football, and you're going to have some hogs up front if you want to do some of the things that you want to do as you join the Big Ten.
Watching that game last week led me to believe that they can muddy the water on offense. Like, they're not going to throw the ball, but like it's kind of maybe like Iowa plus because they're going to have better athletes. But if they can Iowa plus it for a year or so until they get a quarterback, and I don't think it's going to take Sharon Moore a long time to get a quarterback. Recruiting one, and then next year in the transfer portal, there's going to be somebody that's like, I can go to Michigan. Well,
that part.
Sign me up.
Yeah. I mean, and on top of that, to even piggyback what you're saying, they're going to want to go to Michigan, one, because it's the university, but also this isn't maybe Michigan. This is Michigan just won a national championship. So it's cool again for this generation, perhaps, to attend a school like that. So, yeah, I'm with you. They have to do both. They have to, of course, have a young quarterback that they're bringing up, but they also have to get into the transfer portal. It's no reason not to take advantage of it and get this team back on top in the Big Ten versus the Ohio States and the Oregons.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Penn State too. Let me give shout out to my Penn State too, and my Penn State folks too. But James Franklin still has some stuff to prove when it comes to the big boys.
Yeah. Actually, this is an interesting week for James Franklin. He's not playing a big boy because Illinois is, regarded as one of the middle teams in the league. But this Illinois team is damn good. They are really good. Luke Altmaier is playing at a really high level right now after that Nebraska win last week. He's feeling really good. He's a guy who's fought back from some adversity. He was benched last year, and this year has looked really good in all their games, including the second half against Nebraska. He really was locked in and difficult to stop. And, this week they're in Happy Valley. That's going to be tough, but they just played at a tough play. Like, they got a good little warm-up for going to Happy Valley because it's going to be very similar as far as atmosphere-wise. It's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. It's a night game. It's going to be bonkers there at Penn State. So this is Penn State's first prove-it game of the year where, okay, not only do you have to deal with the big boys later on when you play, the Ohio States and all that of the world, but now you've got an upstart who would love nothing more than to take a chunk out of you.
Yeah. Listen, full disclosure, I am president of the Drew Aller fan club. I hoped that Drew Aller could develop into this because last year, for people that didn't watch Penn State, you can see athletically that his arm talent, and also he can get out and stretch defenses. But they kind of used him as a game manager because they didn't have the explosive players that they now have on the outside at receiver. All they had was a KLS last year, and he's much more of a possession receiver. James Franklin, I'll say this. They haven't been getting the amount of sacks, but they've still been getting pressures when you look at the fact that they don't have Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac. You have Abdul Carter now, still kind of playing a hybrid role, but also being used as a defensive end in that kind of Micah Parsons at role. I guess why you would want to entertain that as far as him shifting to the D-line. Listen, last week how I came over here, I raved about Illinois. You and I both talked about, Luke Altmaier. You mentioned his days at Ole Miss and the benching for Paddock. And Paddock came in and lit it up last year. That was one of the questions when we had guests on. We had Jeremy Warner on a couple of times. He comes on for us to talk about Illinois. And we talked to Brett Bielema this year, actually. And the biggest question was, how was Luke Altmaier going to act after being benched? He has far exceeded expectations, my expectations. I'm talking about their expectations, and stepped into that role and has been the leader, but also the determining factor offensively, where this isn't a game manager. This is a guy, when we like Paddock was kind of a swashbuckler out there last year, and Luke Altmaier is playing in that way. You mentioned last week in Lincoln what they did. That's, as you said, that's not an easy place to play when this is really the first time, or maybe the second time this season since they've had 2 ranked opponents, but the nation is watching. That's a Friday night game. So the nation was watching them last Friday night. I know you said Smokey was down there. I wonder what did he enjoy the experience or whatever.
Yeah, he had a blast. But
okay,
as a Nebraska fan, he left happy and sad.
I knew. I figured. I was like, oh man, that's got to sting. But I needed that victory. For Illinois nationally, because you look at this week against Penn State. They're probably not going to win. I think they will give Penn State a nice run for their money, because you're talking about a team the defensive backfield. The Mosses are out there. You look at what Alec Bryant can do and the pressure that Illinois can put on defenders. You look at the pressure that they did to Dylan Raiola late in that game, where they basically took him out of that game. And there was some plays where Dylan Raiola was showing you why he was so highly touted just from how he moved in the pocket. He was taking a couple of steps away and slinging that ball in a veteran fashion, but still Illinois was able to mount a comeback and to take that game over. It's not going to be easy for Penn State, but I don't. When you look at what Drew Aller has as far as the running backs with Singleton and I forget the other running back that they have back there named their 2-headed monster. You look at the tight end; they just have a lot. You know what I'm saying? So it's too. I think this is where the rubber meets the road for Illinois. I don't know as far as if I have the spread when it comes to Penn State's victory, but I definitely have Penn State beating Illinois, because Penn State is that school. When you look at the fact of what they have as the talent, the true question now is, can they overcome what they couldn't in the past when you're talking about the bluest of the bloods in Ohio State, and of course it was Michigan, but now we're looking at it being Oregon this season. That's always kind of been the question, but now at the playoffs they may not have to, but I think James Franklin should still want to. Their offensive coordinator has been doing it up coming over from Kansas. I think one of the questions for them is Tom Allen, the defensive coordinator coming over from Indiana. The defense hasn't, it hasn't been all the way there, but I'm looking forward to it. Andy Kotelnicki is the offensive coordinator that came over from Kansas, who's probably going to end up being the head coach, if not this year, next year, with what he's doing with Drew Aller. But they still kind of miss Manny Diaz, who left them to go be a head coach of Duke this year. But yeah, I definitely have Penn State beating Illinois at home. I think it'll be different. I still probably would take Penn State, because last year was kind of one of those first games where Drew Aller, you could see they had the shackles on him, but they still won, where he didn't score a touchdown. He had a decent game, but it was much more of a game manager. He's not a game manager. He is that guy. And I think he's going to do some nasty things when it comes to the Fighting Illini.
I think it's going to be a really fun game, because I think Brett Bielema likes these kind of things. He likes these kind of things, and but yeah, this is the test, because then you've got if you're Penn State, you got USC in a couple weeks. Like, that's going to be a really fun one, and then a couple weeks after that you have Ohio State. So those are your big boy games right now. Like, you've got your 3 big boys like every other week here. You've got the upstart, you've got a big boy who's a newbie in your league, so you have to kind of like, hey, this is our place kind of a thing. And
right.
Then you've got to finally deal with Ohio State in a year where, like, the last time they beat Ohio State was really good, but that was not an Ohio State championship caliber team. Like, taking down this Ohio State team in the regular season would be huge for Penn State and their seeding, and putting them possibly in that Big Ten championship game, a place they have not really visited.
Yeah, I think this is in the middle of tough schedules. Like you said, nobody thought Illinois was going to probably be that tough, except Brett Bielema. And you point out at USC, again, I have them beating Wisconsin. And I'll say this, too. That Wisconsin defense is moving out there. I know a lot of people, they got beaten by Alabama, but that defense showed some speed. It could be a rough patch. I don't know if they beat Ohio State, because Ryan Day has all the weaponry, and you look at what Chip Kelly's doing with the physicality that he's bringing to that run offense, something that Ohio State's kind of been missing since Urban Meyer's been there, and it kind of deflates the opposing team and it abuses them as far as the wear and tear. I would love, being that Penn State is probably my favorite Big Ten school at this point right now. I would love for it to happen, but I wouldn't put my money on it as of right now, even, and particularly depending on if Ryan Day doesn't play conservative like we've seen him play conservative against Jim Harbaugh Michigan teams the last couple of seasons.
Yeah. I'm sure that he wakes up in the middle of the night going, why do I do that? Like, why do I do that? Like, why do I do that? Like, every other game, I don't do that. And then I get this one, and then I do that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no,
with the weapon. I was so mad at him last year when you look at what he had with the Mecca and Marvin. And it's like, dude, you have a prerequisite of weapons. Exploit, like, put it on the line. If you lose on your sword, like, go out on your shield. Like, don't sit there with these. I can understand a school that doesn't have those weapons playing it safe because you don't want to turn over the ball. But why are you recruiting these kids if you're not going to put them out there to take on a school that, talent-wise, until the last couple of seasons, you had more talent? Clearly, you may have had more talented skill positions even last year, but as you pointed out, you got conservative when that's not the time. So, yeah, I'm sure he wanted to get back at Jim Harbaugh and he didn't get his opportunity. So hopefully he takes it out on Sharon Moore if you're an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, I think about Swingers when he's like, "You're like a bear, man. Like, you got the claws, and how do I kill the bunny? How do I kill the bunny with these claws and these fangs? You're like a bear, man." Like, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. To Ohio State this week, they have an interesting one. Michigan State clearly has taken a step forward under Jonathan Smith, which anybody who's watched Jonathan Smith's coaching career should not be surprised that they're seeing immediate dividends and they're playing cleaner football and better football. Now they have injuries. The talent deficit on this is tilted. They're going to win. Michigan State, while they do have some talent, they have some good players, they're going to win on gumption most of the time and good coaching. This week they better have a lot of gumption if they want to knock off Ohio State. A lot of gumption.
Yeah. I don't know if there's that much gumption in the world. Listen, Aiden Childs is turnover prone. You just think about there's no holes. Like, the thing is, when you talk to reporters at Ohio State, and they don't want to be seen come off as arrogant, but there's really truly no holes when you look at that Ohio State team with all those players that returned on there from the front four, and then you go back to the back five. I like what Michigan State is doing because you think of what happened with Mel Turner last year, and even some players came out and said kind of they didn't like or didn't play for each other. Let me say they didn't like each other. I didn't expect this turnaround as fast, but you pointed out what Smith has done in the past. But yeah, this isn't the game for them to show anything. I think the Maryland game, they should be happy with the fact that they were able to defeat Maryland this year, but I don't have them close to being able to do anything to Ohio State. This is one of those games where it's a barometer for Michigan State for the upcoming seasons with this program and this new coach to look at where they were, and perhaps in the future look at where they are now and talk about, I remember when that team did this to us, and now they wouldn't be able to do this. But right now they're going to get bludgeoned going up against this Ohio State team this weekend. Yeah,
absolutely. So the surprise game of this week, and nobody's going to notice it nationwide unless you're a Big Ten fan, but you have two teams playing really good football right now in Maryland and Indiana. Curt Cignetti's been a godsend for them. Like, everything's working out in Indiana right now. This is the game that's on the Big Ten Network. And look, nobody's like, after this week, we may not talk about these teams again. I don't know. But right. I did think it would be interesting to hear from your perspective when you talk about teams that are making steps forward. Maryland doing well so far, and Curt Cignetti, first year at Indiana, has got them back to a point where they're probably in a bowl game this year.
Yeah, they are. You look at what they've been doing with their rushing attack. I think UCLA was the only team they didn't have more than like 220-something rush yards versus in the play of Curtis Rourke at quarterback has been extremely solid for Indiana. They're doing it the right way. You're doing it one where you're combining your run game and your passing package properly. I didn't have Indiana performing this well, being that, it's the next door. I literally am 5 minutes away from Indiana. Like I can get in the car and there's a road close to I used to go to school right next to Indiana. My high school, St. Francis D. Sales, is right next to Hammond, Indiana. But still, I have no love for them. But yeah, and again, I'm a big Maryland proponent. We've a lot of times had Lights Out join the show to talk about Maryland football. You thought with Talia Tagovailoa leaving, and a lot of people don't realize how he was one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten the last couple of years. But Billy Edwards Jr. has filled in admirably, and you've been getting what you need with him having like 8 touchdowns and a couple interceptions. I really want to go with Maryland here because I just feel like this program has been tuning up longer. But I said on Big Ten Country, I gotta give Cignetti his props. And I have to wait till they lose before I can pick against them. So I'm taking Indiana with this game, even though, like, for me, it's really hard sometimes to go against Maryland, because Maryland, in all fairness, if we're talking about the Big Ten, is over the last several years has been in a better program easily than what Tom Allen had here before he became defensive coordinator at Penn State that he had been running when it comes to the Hoosiers. But right now, you look at what Indiana is able to do. Yeah, I'm definitely choosing Indiana to beat Maryland in a close game.
Yeah, I'm a big Mike Loxley guy. I've always liked him. I think he's really savvy and different, and is like what I always think about him is one day, like, he's going to get the right mix in there, and it's going to click for him, like, in a way that, and people are like, oh, where's this been? It's like, it's kind of been there. It's just, when you're recruiting against Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and all these, like, especially Maryland and Penn State, like, right there, like, I'm sure there's tons of kids that he's like, hey, you want to come here? And they're like, yeah, but Penn State just called. And you're like,
that part.
Yeah. Okay. Like, if he can make a dent in that a little bit.
That's what when I said Lights Out, I was referring to Sean Merriman, former Chargers linebacker, edge rusher. Sean Merriman said what you said. He's always coming on talking about if we can lock in the kids in the DMV, Maryland and the Terrapins can be what we expect them to be. But you pointed out where,
look, the best quarterback from there is Caleb Williams. Where did he go with the Oklahoma and USC?
Exactly. So if you can keep those kids there, but that's hard for a lot of schools that don't have.
E.J. Manuel's from Norfolk, Virginia, right? Like, he was a top quarterback that he went to FSU. So
we see it here in Illinois, where you have schools coming in here right now getting defensive linemen, snatching them out under the nose of these regional schools around here. Like they rarely ever choose Illinois that when a big time program, because this is your future. Like, let's also be clear. I understand why if you have an opportunity to go to Maryland. But what James Franklin has been doing at Penn State, you decide to go to Penn State. I understand why if you are a Caleb Williams and you're looking at, I'm a quarterback, I want to be mentored by someone who has a proven resume of it. You can come in for a year, or you can be a player that comes in as a young freshman. But we know what Lincoln Riley can do. So I understand why. But to the point that you're making, it's about proving that, listen, everything that you can get outside of this region, you can get at home, and you can play easily and closer to your parents. So stay at home. But that's hard. That's a hard thing to really convince kids and to make what hasn't been vogue in for the most part. And I think that's a problem with a lot of schools that are the middle schools in their conferences, to try to prove to those kids that they can stay home instead of going to those larger programs.
All right, let's get outside the Big Ten to the game I know you really care about this week, and that's Georgia and Alabama in Tuscaloosa. This is a time where Georgia's got some injuries on their offensive line. I think that some of the outside noise has kind of gotten to them a little bit. There's a little bit of stress around them that they'd been able to block out until a couple weeks ago. Now, I don't think anybody should be all of a sudden not afraid of them, but they are vulnerable in a way they haven't been. And Kalen DeBoer looks like he hasn't missed a step yet there at Alabama. And Jalen Milroe's playing great football right now. I picked Bama in this game because it's at home, and I kind of prefer Milroe to Carson Beck too. Like, it's just, I think there's some things happening there that everybody wanted to be over, right? They thought, like, okay, good, Saban's gone, it's over. Well, I mean, it's not all that gone. Like, it's only been a couple months. Like, it's not really all that good. His office is still in the building, so if Kalen DeBoer wants to ask him a question, he can just walk to the other side and say, hey, Nick, what do you think about this? So those things are all there. I really like what Bama's putting together so far.
This hits home here. So I'm saying, as a real Bama fan, to be honest with you, and I know a lot of people, and I talk about schools in the Big Ten. I'm like, I talk about Ohio State to people that report on Ohio State. I'm like, say it with y'all chest out. You guys are Ohio State, and you act sometimes meeker than what you should act. Yeah. I'm going to get a tad bit meek right here while I talk trash to other people. Kirby is a different monster, and that's the fear. And I know he doesn't have the best record versus Alabama, but I mean, that record could be flipped with just 1-2 a pass. So like it's crazy. Of course, I'm a Jalen Milroe fan, but let's not forget the accuracy and the arm talent that Carson Beck has. You look at the fact, though, with Jalen Milroe, I think almost 30% of his passes are over 20 yards, and this is from someone who's looked more as a dual threat quarterback. So we know he can get it done through the air from the fourth and Milroe last season. I got to see it. Paul, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I'm some people, and it's funny, my co-host on Big Ten Country, he's an alumni of U of I, Illinois, for anybody, and he won't pick them, right? Yeah. And I'm a ride or die, so I'm a ride, of course, with the Tide, but I'll be happy when there's nothing but zeros on the board, because Kirby can do it versus Alabama. I mean, that Georgia program, you know what? This part right here. Everything that we just said about Maryland, and of course, Georgia is more heralded than Maryland. But what Kirby has done, sealing the border around those players in Georgia, it's what we're kind of saying about these other institutions, because you can just see how talent rich, and of course, it's players outside of the state because of what he's done, but how talent rich that area is. I want Kalen DeBoer. I want there to not be a misstep with him taking over for the great Nick Saban. I still have to see moving forward how these trenches are going to be. And the cupboard wasn't totally bare. I know there were some transfer portal. There are a decent amount of transfer portal guys, see Ohio State, but still, it's Bama. I just hope, and I was talking about being in vogue and being cool a second ago, I hope that Bama doesn't seem stale to these kids that are right now in high school. You know what I'm saying? I hope that they can still feel the coolness so that we can keep this going. I know it'll never be one because of the playoffs in general, but it'll never be what Nick Saban had with just the embarrassment of titles. But if you can get to where, every 5 years, maybe we get one or two, I'll be happy, because Nick Saban took us on such a ride. And a lot of people, I used to tell one of my close friends who's a Bama fan, like, I used to tell him the last 3 years, I was like, the empire has fallen. Just enjoy it. I'm like, when the Bryce Young year, I would tell him, like, we stole the title. And there's nothing better than stealing any championship. And if you have a team that it looks like it has a chance, but it's not the odds-on favorite, and you snatch it, it's great just to add to the trophy case. And that's what I felt like that season that the Bryce Young, they won with Bryce Young at quarterback for Bama. I have Bama winning this game, but I'm not saying it with my chest out, Paul, to answer your question.
Yeah, I want to look. As a Florida State guy, like, I have years where I will say it with my chest out.
Yeah,
they're coming to me this week. I'm going tomorrow to the SMU game, and I have only once in my life, when they played at Oklahoma, Christian Ponder was a quarterback, so a long time ago. I went to that game, and my friends and I walked in, and we were like, this is not going to be great. And like, I've never walked in with like, okay, so I know how you feel. Yes. It's not quite like yours is not as severe as mine is right now, but I know, like, I've got real problems.
I feel you. Don't get this twisted. Yeah. The first Bobby Bowden was like the first college coach. No, probably Lou Holtz, but he was the second college coach that I loved as a young kid. Like, Florida State up here was really vogue for us. Like, you're talking about Deion, Leroy Butler, like, just that was the school. Like, when the movie The Program, we're like, man, that's Florida. It's like, we love Florida State. Yeah. So, and it's funny, I talk about Florida State a lot as far as those hot and cold schools where Florida State, you look at what Jimbo had going there, then it's like, it's frustrating because I love Florida State. So I know exactly what you're saying, that you can't say it, with your chest out. I feel sorry, and I don't mean this in a pandering manner, because that's one of those programs that you just wish could sustain something for an extended amount of time. And you look at where it looked like they were going before the quarterback got hurt last year, and it kind of rang true when people was like, you don't deserve, quote unquote, to make it when the quarterback's not there. And then this year you're on your face again. And I feel like if you're on the outside, you just don't know that this kind of just happens with Florida State, unfortunately, since the waning years of Bobby Bowden, that it just hasn't been a consistent program. But I hate it because to me, that was college football as a young kid of Florida State. But so I feel you on the Florida State.
No. You have no idea how many people I went to college with from the Midwest. And it's because one of my best friends in college, DeMarco, Chicago, born and bred. I watched many of if the Cubs or the Bears or somebody were on, we'd sit out and watch them. I watched many a sad Bears game with him.
Sorry, apologies.
It's funny, and you do the Bears podcast as well. It is funny because I think your city is the best sports city. There's no one in the world, that has the most engaged, knowledgeable sports fans on every sport. You don't go to games in Chicago and then you've got casual fans.
Oh no,
when you walk in, you're the casual fan. Even though I'm a crazy sports fan,
right?
I'm now casual compared to these people. No matter where I am. If you're going to open a sports bar, before you do that, you should go to Chicago and drive around and figure out how they do it before you come back. Because that's I've never been to a bad one in Chicago ever. It is, and they appreciate they appreciate sports outside. They just love it, and I think it's the definition of I think that's what ties the city together more than anything is we hate the cold, but we're going to be here. We don't mind. And no matter what, we're going to lock arms for the Bulls or the Blackhawks, or, we'll argue about the White Sox and the Cubs, we commiserate with the Bears, and we feel that as a city all together.
It is one of the best summer cities, and they should probably pay. It's one of the best summer cities in this country. We sit on a Midland Ocean. You can call it a lake. It's a Midland Ocean, and I don't stay far from the lake. It's one of the prettiest things. Our downtown. I used to watch. I forget his last name from No Reservations. Tony. I can't remember. Thank you, Anthony Bourdain. Thank you so much, Paul. Anthony Bourdain would always say that it's the second metropolis. It's just us in New York City, and we're cleaner. Again, you watch on the news, and it seems like it's crime-ridden. I live in the urban environment. It's not what you see on the news. It's a very good, nice city to visit. But what you said, your point. I'll say this. We're upset about some of the owners' decisions here. But as far as the in-game experience, and I'm not trying to take shots at anybody because I love the fact that they're good fans everywhere. I went to a playoff game in Indianapolis, Bulls versus the Pacers, right? And you could tell Michael Jordan had beaten on those fans so much, they didn't believe that me and my friend were from Chicago. They just thought we were Pacers fans in Indiana that became Bulls fans, because you know how that can happen when you grow up, right? And even though it's I love Reggie Miller, so I wouldn't, if I grew up in Indiana, I would have been a Pacers fan. Yeah. But I was telling the fans, come look at my state sticker and my city plate. I'm from Chicago. And they were so kind and nice, even while talking trash. But the point being, I was talking to some of their fans about the in-game experience. And the thing about, and you know this, when people take sports seriously, and I'm even meaning this from owners, you're upset, the in-game experience to keep you attached to the game, it's just at the United Center is crazy. The team can be bad, but there's still things that are going to keep you engaged. And as you talked about, just the sports knowledge, the history, you can go and learn something, even being a Chicago resident, with somebody older than you telling you about something that happened in the 60s and 70s. And like you said, it brings us together. I go out on the streets and people want to talk to me because they see me occasionally on talking some Bear stuff. And it's a beautiful thing. I think that's what's in general with sports, Paul, is one reason that we love it so, because, and it's funny, and for anybody that has kids out there, and kids kind of live in this a la carte microwave world where they don't have their attention span has been warped. That's just how it's been warped. So the amount of time it takes to really get into sports, sometimes they don't have it. But one reason I always tell my son, like, sports is an open avenue to get to know anybody. Like, and that's to your point, as far as here in Chicago, sports will get you to somebody you would think you would never talk to, and you guys can have the longest conversations just bonding, talking about sports. And that's I think one of the main reasons why people like us end up doing things like this, because it connects us, one, to the past. It connects me to my dad, but also it's just one of those things that you love and that you enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Kenneth Davis, Big Ten Country. Love it every week, Kenneth. We'll talk to you next week.
See you. Guys, have a good one.
All right, there we go. Next up, Josh Neighbors. We'll talk Big 12 with us from Big 12 Watch. This is 365 Sports.